Hey everybody, welcome to another Good Vibes Gaming discussion. I'm your host for today, Ash Paulson, and I am joined today by my wonderful friends and GVG co-founders, Steve Bowling and Derek Bittner, and we are here today to break the silence on silent protagonists. We are here to give our thoughts on silent heroes versus pre-established main characters, all that good stuff. Steve, Derek, how you doing today, man?
I am doing well. I have a lot of thoughts on this, like thoughts with a capital T.
Right, that's what you were saying before when I told you guys that this was the topic that won our discussion poll, and I suggested this one. So hey, one of my topics won today. That's nice to have. And on that note, if you're curious how you can vote for topics like the ones we are discussing today, head on over to patreon.com/gvgaming, where we offer a variety of tiers. This particular perk, voting on the topics we discuss each week, is reserved for our patrons at the producer tier and above. So that's just one of many tiers we offer over on Patreon, though. So check us out over there. But either way, we need to get going here. And yes, so today, this was a topic I came up with. And I'm so glad it won, because this is a topic that I feel pretty strong about as well, Steve. And but because you told me when I told you this topic was the one we were discussing, you were like, as you said, I have thoughts. Oh man, I'm going to rile some people up. I'm excited. I want to get right into it. Let's choose violence, chaos. Let's jump right into the fray today. Steve, I'm going to throw things right over to you. Get us started, man. What are your really intense thoughts here on this topic?
All right. So I want to take you all back to 1997, specifically the beginning of the year. I was sitting in my living room at my mom's house playing Final Fantasy VII on my PS1. And if y'all have never played the original Final Fantasy VII, Cloud is almost a silent protagonist. Almost. He very rarely speaks. And I remember playing through like the first, let's just say half of the game, first third, somewhere around there, until Cloud finally like actually says some words, and I realize that he's not just a silent protagonist. Like he's just very quiet. He just doesn't talk a lot. And I feel like that was the moment at which I realized silent protagonists are terrible. Like there's nothing good about silent protagonists whatsoever. And I feel like it is an outdated method of immersion. Like people tend to defend the silent protagonist as like you map yourself onto this character. Like the character is an avatar for the player. Like it's just an outward representation of the player. And storytelling has moved so far beyond this crutch. Like I look at games specifically. I'm talking about you, Nintendo. I'm looking at you, Nintendo. I'm talking about Link more specifically than just about any other character. It is time to give characters that we've spent our whole lives playing as voices and personalities of their own. Like, I am dying for Link to just talk. Like, I've heard enough of him grunting and yelling. I need this man to actually have thoughts about things that are happening around him. I'm not having them. I'm just thinking, like, man, this guy can slay monsters. He can save the entire world. He can kill gods. But he can't tell us that he wants a burrito. Like, I need this man to just say something.
Don't we all always want a burrito, though? Can't we just imply that there's never a time where a burrito isn't wanted?
Well, yeah, everyone wants a burrito. All the time. Vegan, meat eater, I don't care who you are. Burritos are delicious. But I feel like, you know, it's not just about voice acting, because it doesn't have to be a voice acting thing, right? Like, I don't need my characters fully voice acted, but I need my characters to stop being like a shell or a husk of a character. I'm not going to inhabit this person at all. Like, I don't think about, man, it'd be cool if Steve Bowling was grabbing the Master Sword. No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be cool at all. Like, I want to see my boy Link, like, fully realized as a character. I don't buy Nintendo's excuse that he is, like, just an empty shell of a character for you to place your own feelings into. He's not a vessel for me. It's just a character that has this weird quirk about him that I frankly don't like and I wish would go away. Like, it's the one thing about characters that I don't like, is that they don't have their own take on what's going on in the world around them. Like, I'm going to have my own feelings separate of the character that I'm playing as. I'm never going to say, oh, that character is reacting the exact same way I would. Because let's be real. Like, if someone was like, oh God, a monster is destroying the entire city we live in, I'm not going to be like, yo, I'm going to go fight that. I'm going to be like, I'm joining everyone else and getting out. I'm getting in my car and I'm leaving. I'm going to hide. I'm a coward. I am not going to just say like, well, I'm going to go find a weapon and save the world. That's not me. I'm not going to get a plucky crew of friends together and go try to destroy this world-ending threat. I am going to go underground and disappear until someone better than me takes care of it. And I just want my characters to actually have like fully fleshed out, realized personalities, and that includes them speaking. Like, yeah, there is a great way of like implying what the character is going to do, but I don't think anybody ever comes to like a wildly different conclusion on these things. Like, everyone reads the same dialogue, and I would say 99.99% of people all come to the conclusion of like, oh, well, the hero is doing this. Like, no one comes up with something very far off from what the perceived intent of those dialogue-less conversations are, right? Like, especially because 9 times out of 10, the character like that is interacting with your silent protagonist puts the words in their mouth for them. Like, oh, you're saying we've got to go save the world? And it's like, you could have just had him say that. You could have had the main character say it, because you're making someone say it for them anyway, which means that you're not even giving the player a ton of agency to put their own feelings into it. You know, you're not giving them like, oh, hey, I think that it's this way. There's very seldom like more than one way to interpret what a silent protagonist's intentions are, because the game just uses other means of like pushing the narrative forward by having other characters deliver the dialogue that normally would have been delivered by the protagonist. It's just a weird choice that I think made a lot more sense when games were more primitive. Like, when games couldn't paint the picture they necessarily wanted to paint. I think it's kind of a relic of a bygone era. Like, we now have the ability for developers to craft anything they want. They can show you whatever they want on screen, and they're still choosing to just, in certain instances, have the character kind of be this mute weirdo. And I feel like it's time to move on. It's time for storytelling to just, I get that indies probably could still benefit from this, but AAA developers, like Nintendo specifically, need to just embrace the fact that they have created these characters that have rich backstories at this point that people want to be recognized. I don't know. It's just, I got strong feelings about this. Silent protagonists need to just go away. I feel like we've moved on past this as a medium.
Well, on the face of it, I pretty much completely agree with almost everything you just said, and I don't want this just to be like, oh yeah, completely agree, and then regurgitate everything you just said. So, Derek, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of weigh in here with your thoughts, even if you also agree with Steve. But just in case if you do disagree with a little bit, I'd rather get your thoughts in there first, because I'm gonna co-sign on a lot of this.
So you know how riveting my conversation was, because I stayed silent that entire time just to kind of prove a point. Because I think, 8 minutes or so of not even making sure not to laugh or anything like that, like I usually do to whatever Steve was saying. It's when you have that old type of game and that character doesn't respond, you need to have something on camera to convey that emotion. And, I'm thinking to other games that have that. Link is a good example. He does not really react to things in Link to the Past. Back in the day, you don't have those kind of reactions. You are just an avatar going through there. Link in those games had no personality. Compare this to Chrono in Chrono Trigger, who had a bit more animations. The camera, they would specifically have Chrono face the camera to show some of his emotions. Granted, they were very basic, like fist pump to let's go and that sort of thing, or a laugh, what have you. But it was still more than you got. And these days, I would argue that even the silent protagonists are starting to have a bit more personality to them, that they are using the media to try to continue this on and evolve it. And granted, I don't disagree with most of what Steve said. I think they're all very salient points, and I do prefer having a protagonist with their own voice, their own backstory. It's not just a blank slate that I'm filling because I'm not interesting. So I don't find that interesting to have. But I have noticed a trend lately of a lot of silent protagonists still injecting their personalities in there. Best examples in my mind are actually Breath of the Wild and Persona 5, because neither Joker nor Link says a word in those games, except maybe on occasion in Joker's case, but it's not a whole lot. But their responses that the player can pick does convey a type of personality for them. And even Persona 3 and 4 do that same sort of thing, where you get a sense of the personality of that protagonist in that Persona game, where Persona 3's protagonist is very moody and can be an absolute jerk, while Persona 5 is kind of a goofball. And same goes for Link in Breath of the Wild with some of the responses that you can pick for those games. The problem is they happen so rarely and from usually just side content when you're not railroaded into, but thou must, that it doesn't leave a firm impression. You'll see it multiple times while playing. You'll pick up on it as you're just looking for other things to see, but it never leaves a strong impression of exactly what you're trying to convey with the character. Now, there's also the visual medium where, again, going to Link, when I could tell you kind of Link's general demeanor. Thank you.
Yeah.
General demeanor in Wind Waker and Skyward Sword, where you do see him kind of evolve and change and see kind of the personality there. The problem is, again, it just doesn't stand out, and that's the key thing with silent protagonists, is that they just don't stand out anymore. You can have these protagonists that can really invest you and get you intrigued and want to see their story, even though you're the one inhabiting that. And even when you get those choices where you can be like in Mass Effect, a paragon or an absolute bastard, it's up to you, but they still have their own voice and it conveys that. And I think that's just more inherently interesting. But I do think first-person games get away with silent protagonists more. Let's take, for example, Doom Guy. You are Doom Guy in that. Doom Guy does not talk in Doom 2016, but you see through his actions just kind of the guy he is. And I think that's the key thing here, is that silent protagonists can work if you have a good setup for it and you have the ability to convey the emotions of them and still provide that personality where it's like, yeah, I know this isn't me, but dang, I felt good doing it. I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm falling on silent protagonists. I don't think they need to be outlawed completely, but they need to have a very specific use.
I like the idea of silent protagonists in video games being outlawed, like something so, in the grand scheme of things, so unimportant, literally being on the books. It's outlawed. It's not allowed to do. You are legally barred from adding silent protagonists to your games. No, I agree. I don't think they necessarily need to be put out to pasture completely. I think there are very limited scenarios in which they can work, but in general, as I said, I agree with a lot of what Steve said. I just personally don't find them appealing. It's very difficult for me to latch on to and care about a character if they're, a silent protagonist. And I know, as Steve said, the point of those is to be able to self-insert. It's power. It's supposed to be a power fantasy, right? If the character you're controlling on screen isn't, showcasing any of their own emotions, then that makes it easier for you to slip into that hero role and become the hero yourself. Not for me. Maybe my imagination sucks. Maybe I need better power of imagination, but I'm still always cognizant of the fact that I'm sitting, holding a controller, pressing buttons, and controlling a character on screen who, by the way, looks nothing like me. In the cases of characters like Link or 11 or whatever. So yeah, I've never really understood that power fantasy or that self-insert thing where, yeah, you can name Link whatever you want in a Zelda game, but just because I name him Ash doesn't really mean okay, so the Deku Tree is speaking to me now, not Link. Okay, what? I don't know. Maybe I just need a better power of imagination, but that never did it for me. I was never sold on the appeal of trying to insert yourself into a character. And honestly, it actively takes away from a game's storytelling quality for me, depending on the game, I guess, to varying degrees. But Dragon Quest XI is one I've been thinking about a lot right now as we've been talking. And Derek, as you know, and no spoilers, of course, but some really heavy shit goes down in that game. Like the your characters, the main party in Dragon Quest XI, they go through some very difficult, very tragic things, and to see everybody react realistically to these tragedies around them, while 11, the main character, just kind of sits there with a blank expression on his face. Yeah, I mean, I know how he would react. I can see it in my mind's eye. I would just rather him be able to react like any of the other characters. It's so weird to me and so jarring, and takes me out of the world, out of the storytelling, to have the main character just stand there with a blank expression on his face while everybody around him reacts appropriately or realistically or reacts at all. And
there are moments where he reacts, but there is a very egregious moment where he kind of doesn't, and you're almost screaming at him. You might know that what I'm talking about in the beginning of Act 3.
I know exactly what
and it's like, what is wrong with you? Why, what's going on? Why are you doing this? And that, I'd say that's the most frustrating moment of playing as 11 and being the silent protagonist, and just not having that conveyed, that what's going on. Again, staying completely spoiler free.
Right.
But yeah, I find myself inhabiting the body of Dante more when I'm doing crazy combos in Devil May Cry. That's my power fantasy. Is like I'm inhabiting this guy, like I'm a completely different person and able to do this crazy stuff and get my scores even higher. That's when I feel crazy. I don't know if I have that same feeling when I'm playing like Skyrim or whatever, a first person RPG type thing. I don't know. It just never really clicked in the same way for me. But that might also be just me. Other people might be able to much more easily get in that headspace.
I'm glad that you went back to first person games, because when you were talking earlier, Derek, about first person shooters like Doom and how those kind of work with the silent protagonist theme, I started to realize that I really agree with that. And I didn't think about it, but I think the reason why is because you seldom see the character you're playing as. So it is easier to kind of insert yourself, because all you see at best is like a pair of hands, right? Yeah. And that character is very seldom viewed in cutscenes. And on top of that, when you do see the character, he's wearing head-to-toe armor, so you can't see like his face or any real defining characteristics of Doom Guy. So it's easy to kind of be like, well, yeah, I could be Doom Guy. I mean, wearing a bunch of armor and given some wild weapons and powers, and I probably, I guess if I were stuck in a situation where the option was fight like hell or die, I guess I'd choose fight like hell, maybe. So I think they do a good job of setting the stage for Doom Guy to kind of be a character that you can put yourself in the shoes of, because you literally don't see him very often. I think the issue with me with third-person games, and coming back to an example Ash gave, is you can name Link whatever you want, but you can't change what he looks like. So it's never going to feel like he's a representation of you as a character. There are games with silent protagonists that do work, but I think it often involves like just a literal blank slate of a character. For instance, Immortals Phoenix Rising has you playing as just kind of like a generic, like, create a character. And then you name them whatever the hell you want, and they just kind of go through the motions of like they don't mention you by name ever, but you also are just kind of like a third party to this adventure that's being told by the Greek gods themselves. Like, they're narrating your adventure as you go through, kind of telling your tale. So I think that kind of works. But yeah, in most cases, I think the issue surrounds characterization and how they apply that, because if you're going to tell me like, oh, hey, you can name Link whatever you want, but he's still going to be like 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, kind of jacked. And he's going to not have feelings about anything he does whatsoever. That's what takes me out of it, because I end up playing these games, and like you guys were kind of alluding to, I end up caring more about the other characters than I do about the one I'm playing as. Like, for instance, at one moment you see Zelda break down into tears about what's going on, the bad things happening around her. Again, no spoilers, but you probably should have played Breath of the Wild by now. It's like 4 years old. Go play it. But you see Zelda break down into tears, and you feel so incredibly bad for her. Like, the odds are so stacked against her, and it does feel hopeless. And it makes you want to save her all the more toward, it makes you want to save her. But it doesn't, like, you never feel that way about Link. You never, like, he just kind of stone-faced sits there and he's like, yeah, well, bad things are happening. Like, could you imagine for just a moment, minor spoilers for the very opening of Breath of the Wild, but could you imagine waking up in what is essentially a bathtub in the middle of a cave and just being like, well, that looks like a phone. I'm going to grab that and go outside. Like, no questions, just, all right, man, I heard a lady talking in my head. That seems normal. I just woke up in my chonies in a cave. Okay. And I'm going to grab this device that someone in my head is telling me to grab. That seems like an okay thing to do. I have zero questions or concerns and just heading out.
Yeah.
There's a way to make that opening work and have it be a just utter shock that Link can talk and will talk sporadically throughout the game, where he is silent, but he's more expressive and sort of looking around because, his memories are gone. But all he can do is follow this voice and do what it says. And he's, you're running around and exploring and checking out this stuff. And then when you come across the old man, that's when he talks. And it's like, what is happening? Why am I being told this stuff? And it has that nice sort of breakthrough moment for the player that, oh my God, Link's actually talking. He has a more of a overt personality this time. Cool, let's go. Keep him mostly silent, but until those key moments.
Well, it's specifically in the case of Breath of the Wild, it almost feels like Nintendo were like they really wanted to give Link a personality and more of a voice, and were actively trying to stop themselves because of that whole diary that you could find in Zelda's room, where you get a lot of insight as to why Link is the way he is, and they try to explain away his silence and why he doesn't talk very much. But it seems as though they really wanted to communicate more of a bespoke personality for Link to the player. And if that's the case, I just say, do it, try it. Maybe, and maybe Link actually having a voice is a bit of a monkey's paw situation. Like, as you said, Steve, he doesn't necessarily need to be voice acted. Maybe it's better that he just has text boxes. Some people don't really love the way Zelda sounds in Breath of the Wild. I get that. And I don't really know how I feel about Link actually speaking. They would have to get it perfectly. Otherwise, maybe it's just best to have him speak in text boxes, and I'm okay with that. But there have been so many times in Zelda games or games with any game with a silent protagonist, where I feel as though I'm robbed of the emotional engagement that I would otherwise have with the story, with this world, with the characters. The example you used, Steve, of Zelda breaking down and, the odds are stacked against her. And if I were her friend, I would be like, hey, it's okay, I want to give her a hug. So I'm just like, it's like, Link, I don't want to be you. Link, give her a damn hug. Tell her it's going to be okay. I want to see that emotional connection between the characters on screen. It does nothing for me for Link to be silent in some half-assed attempt to make me feel like I am the hero. I don't need to be the hero. I play video games to escape the drudgery of the real world. I like myself just fine, but I don't need to see myself or feel like myself in a video game. I'm perfectly fine following the exploits of characters who are not me, and I think that's a lot more interesting. I want to see... I like the hero arc, the hero's journey. I want to see the character I'm controlling and seeing on screen realize their destiny, overcome their trials. It doesn't need to be me. I'm overcoming trials every day just by making it through the day alive. Like, I'd rather just play video games.
The big thing is Steve alluded to, and as I think about it more, it is completely genre based, like adventure games, action games, stuff with a really forward moving plot. That's where silent protagonists don't really work anymore. But you look at other games that, either first person where you can lose yourself in that character quite literally, or even just low key games like Animal Crossing. They don't talk. There's a lot of times where I think Stardew Valley, your protagonist doesn't talk. Like those type of sim games where you are kind of playing yourself, that works. There's a time and place for the silent protagonist that you will lose yourself in. You don't think about it. It's like, this is me hanging out with these guys. And you're just sort of able to easily project your own personality over this and how you react and how you like, oh, I don't like this guy. I'm going to get rid of him from my village. This guy sucks. That's just, that makes sense. And I think we are starting to see that more and more where there's, in modern times, I think there are, like, other than the legacy content, there's less and less silent protagonists. Like, I'm trying to think of the last, like, new game that has a silent protagonist that's not from an indie title. Like,
I guess DQ11.
yeah, but that's Dragon Quest is traditional as all get out.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. They do seem to be. I mean, except for the like Western RPGs are. I don't want to say guilty of this because silent protagonists don't have to be objectively a bad thing. So I think we'll see games like like Elder Scrolls 6. That'll probably games that traditionally have had silent protagonists or self-insert characters will probably continue to, right?
Exactly.
But in general, yeah, you don't see them as often as maybe you used to, and I do think that has to do with what you touched on, Steve, toward the beginning, which was just the evolution of cinematic storytelling in video games. The evolution of games' ability to display characters and their emotions on screen. That just wasn't as possible in the 8 and 16-bit days. Although I would still posit that even games like FF6 and Chrono Trigger and FF4 with their super tiny sprites and the emotive sprites they have, I still think that was way more interesting than a silent protagonist.
Agreed.
I love me some emotive sprites. So it's not just you don't have to have voice acting and fully directed cutscenes in a 3D sense, but yeah, I find it so much harder to connect on a personal level when when the game wants me to imagine myself in the game. That's just impossible for me. There are exceptions. I think one I want to point out is Mass Effect, but I think that's because Shepard isn't necessarily a silent protagonist so much as a mostly blank slate protagonist. Shepard has a voice, and for me, the reason I was able to enjoy Mass Effect the way I did was because I didn't try to make. I don't know if, for those of you who played Mass Effect, generally that if you try to make a Shepard that doesn't look like the default male or female Shepard, they usually turn out to be god-awfully cursed ass ugly. Like,
yeah,
it is almost impossible to make a good-looking Shepard in that game that isn't one of the default Shepards. And so for me, what I did was I played as the default male Shepard, with his default voice, and then, projected my choices onto him, which for me felt like it was kind of a cool combination of like, okay, yeah, I'm Commander Shepard, this is what I would do, but I also still get to enjoy kind of the mimetic quality of male Shepard and his kind of deadpan responses to people, which kind of make for their own kind of humor. So it was kind of a weird halfway point between me projecting myself onto Shepard and Shepard still kind of having his own weirdly awkward personality, and I kind of enjoyed that. So there are exceptions to it where you can project yourself onto a character, and I can enjoy that, but I think the reason I was able to is because at least Shepard already had a default appearance that wasn't mine and already had a voice, right? Yep. So he's not silent so much as kind of a mostly blank slate, and I think there's a difference there.
I agree with that. I was actually wanting to bring up The Witcher 3 before you mentioned that, and it's a very similar scenario where Geralt of Rivia is very much like a already defined character with his own voice and his own qualities and his own personality, but you do get to project yourself into that existing character at several points throughout the game. Like, you have dialogue choices and you get to choose how Geralt responds to certain things. I remember one of my favorites being at the beginning of the Bloody Baron quest chain, where you just walk into a tavern and some people are giving you a hard time because they don't like Witchers. They think you're weird. They think you're different. And you basically have the choice to, like, just talk them down, like calm them down, or use like a spell to forcibly like chill them out, or just kill them. And you're like, and I remember sitting there and I'm thinking, like, this is essentially like the Witcher's version of racism. I'm gonna kill these guys. And I said, all right, Geralt, let's do it. And he's like, well, that's the last thing you guys are ever gonna say. And then I got to just cut them up. And I remember, further down the line, you find out that like the Baron finds out that you just slaughtered his people at a bar. And he's like, I'm not letting you in my castle. He's like, I see what you do to my guys. Yeah. And I really liked that because I was like, okay, I got to make the choice I wanted to make, and the game didn't try to like steer me another way or force me into a different conversation. And there were actual consequences. Yeah. And it was just fantastic. So I think that for me is probably my ideal compromise of getting to inhabit a character and project a little bit of myself into that character's choices, but also still having the character be their own thing, like have their own personality traits,
It's
their own
your version of Geralt. It's your version of Shepard. It's your version of whoever.
exactly.
Life is Strange is very good about this as well, letting you follow bespoke protagonists while projecting your choices as to what they should do in key situations and watching them face consequences for those decisions. So I do think, there's a good happy medium to be had here, even for people who like us who seemingly typically don't enjoy silent protagonists. What's interesting though about all this is that I've thought about this before and also before this discussion, and how as much as I really don't like silent protagonists, and I say that I really don't, and I don't, I feel strongly about that. It must ultimately, at the end of the day, not be that much of a mitigating factor for me, because most of my favorite game, or a lot of my favorite games of all time, have silent protagonists. Chrono Trigger is my favorite game of all time, and yet I can overlook the fact that Chrono is a mostly silent protagonist. I don't like it, but at the end of the day, it kind of falls away from me in the face of everything else that game does so perfectly. Same thing with Dragon Quest XI, another one of my favorite games ever. Silent protagonist. Okami, a bit of a different story here, because Amarteta is a wolf, so it's a little bit different, but still a silent protagonist. She does emote a lot through various wolf sounds and mannerisms, but she's still a silent protagonist. And then even the Wind Waker. But that's also kind of an interesting thing, is because I've said many times before that Hero of Wind's Link is my favorite Link, and a lot of the reason for that is because it's one of the only Zelda games where Link is his own character. He's he has a life before he becomes the hero. He has his sister, his grandma, his life on the island. He emotes, and you can kind of get a feel for what kind of kid Wind Waker Link is just by watching him kind of do what he does and emote, even though he's otherwise mostly silent. So it's kind of weird, even though I really do feel strongly about this, that most of my favorite games ever have either completely or mostly silent protagonists. And I recognize that I don't like that about those games, but it doesn't really matter, I guess, that much at the end of the day for me, which is kind of weird.
It's a preference thing. And yeah, you prefer the other, but you recognize when something is done well. Other elements kind of fill in those gaps, or you just are taken in by what it does do right. It's a balance, and when you see those balances done well, sure, you would have preferred these other things, but it's hard not to recognize greatness or what appeals to you. It's just sort of what's there, and I think that's the key thing here. Is like, you might prefer silent protagonist, you might not, but it's generally agreed upon. There's a lot of good games that utilize them and don't. I mean, it's a choice of the developers and how they choose to wield that. Ultimately wield that choice is effective or not. It's a game by game basis, and sure, we'd love to see it change in certain cases and want to see the potential that could be unleashed there. But I mean, we just have to wait and see if that actually happens or not. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it of course is, like so many other things, something that can't just be waved away as a one-size-fits-all situation. Of course, it is a game-by-game thing. Some games do the silent protagonist thing very well for the kind of game that they are. Some games maybe don't as well. So it is something that you can't just say, well, all silent protagonists never work. Obviously, even in this very discussion, we've gone from like, oh yeah, we don't like them, to, well, there are certain avenues and contexts and genres in which they can work. I completely agree with the whole Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, that kind of sim type experience. Completely agree. I don't mind having my character be silent. I don't need to see my villager's hero journey. That doesn't appeal to me. So yeah, I do think there absolutely are avenues in which they can work. But I think for me, I guess there's a correlation between the more a game expects me to resonate with it emotionally, the less I'm going to want to see a silent protagonist in it, because so much of what you experience is through the eyes of that protagonist, and you want to see them react naturally and realistically to the things that their friends, their loved ones, what have you, are going through in that world. And so, and as we said, with Breath of the Wild, it seemed like Nintendo wanted so badly to make Link a bit more of an emotive protagonist, but stopped short of really making that actual leap. And I really hope they do it, maybe with Breath of the Wild 2. I'm not expecting it. But we've seen what can happen when Link is allowed to have a bit more of a bespoke personality. The Wind Waker happened, and that's, a lot of people love that game for various reasons. But I think, I hesitate to call him Toon Link because there are various versions of Toon Link. But Wind Waker Link, I think that there's a lot that people love about that character that sets him apart from other versions of Link who really are just silent protagonists. And on the subject of Link, I actually find it kind of ironic. One of the things I've personally felt burned by with Zelda over the years is that Link, he used to be left-handed. And that was one of the only bespoke things about Link as a hero that wasn't just a mirror of the player, but he actually, that was like his one defining characteristic. He was left-handed. I'm left-handed. I always thought that was cool to be able to play as like a man. There's a left-handed hero out there, and people, make fun of left-handed people. Nah, this guy doesn't matter. He's the hero of the time, hero of wins, everything. But that changed when Skyward Sword happened because they wanted to make it. I guess they were worried about there being a visual disconnect for left-handed people and watching, or for right-handed people, the majority, and watching Link wield his sword with his left hand. So they made him right-handed, and ironically, I hated that.
I gotta issue a small correction there, only because I am also left-handed. And so this story has a particular importance to me as well, because I felt the same way about it. They did it in Twilight Princess for the Wii.
Oh, right. Yeah. See, it was Twilight Princess. That's
They mirrored the entire game
right.
to put the sword in Link's right hand. And I remember thinking,
and I played that on Wii.
Yeah, I was like, damn it. I was like, that was my one thing, like my one left-handed person
one thing.
I was like, yeah, I'm cool like Link, but they took it away from us, Ash. I feel your pain.
No, I'm.
Oh, go ahead.
Funny. Thanks for the correction. I completely forgot that it was because I played Twilight Princess on Wii, and I always regretted not playing it on GameCube because that just took me. That bothered me so much.
Well, it took me forever to realize. Wait, it's the same map as Ocarina of Time. That's cool. It took me forever because
because you don't get to
it's weird.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a second.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just going to say that I feel like you hit the nail on the head with kind of the expectation of emotional response from the player. And I do think that that's where silent protagonists kind of fall off for me. Like Doom, while you don't see the guy, it is just like an action-packed, like, balls to the wall kind of game where you're not expected to feel any real nuanced emotion about what's going on. Like, yeah, demon bad, kill demon. Like, that is Doom,
Yeah.
And Animal Crossing, like Derek mentioned, is a game where you're meant to feel like the owner of everything around you. Like, everything that goes on that island is because of you. And because of that, you don't really, like, you as the player are enacting your will throughout the entire game. Like, you're never, there's nothing to leave in the hands of the character versus the player. Like when you go to Animal Crossing, you're like, yeah, I want this guy to live here. I want him to have this color house, and I want it to be right there. You make all the choices. And so I think it makes sense in that case because it feels like Animal Crossing does a great job of making you feel like the game is not talking to your character. It's talking to you, the player, from beyond the screen. And I feel like that's part of what makes games like Stardew and Animal Crossing feel like, the protagonist is just kind of a representation of yourself in the game, and it's not its own character.
Right.
But yeah, I think that, it is interesting throughout the course of this discussion how I feel like, initially my take, which turned out not to be nearly as hot as I expected. I expected some pushback on it, was that silent protagonists are kind of awful and they're not a great narrative vehicle, especially. But we've kind of, as we peeled that back, we've kind of learned like, okay, there are places where they fit. And I do think that in the long run, silent protagonists aren't going anywhere. They are part of like the fabric of the history of gaming in a way. And I think there will always be places where they're used, whether I agree with it or not. There will, it is kind of like an integral part of the 8 and 16-bit era of gaming. When we all grew up with games like those, and like you said, Ash, a lot of my favorite games. I've spent a lot of time bagging on our boy Link throughout this, but he stars in at least 2 of my favorite games ever, being Breath of the Wild and The Wind Waker, respectively. And I don't think those games are any lesser for not having him speak, but at the same time, I always come away thinking like, but what if? What if he did talk? How would I feel about? And you can go back 20 years and see people having this very debate that we're having right now. I remember talking about Link being silent on the IGN message boards shortly after Ocarina of Time came out, and thinking like, man, it'd be cool if he talked more. And there's been a long running debate about whether that makes him less of a character or not, or more of a character or not. And I feel like we're probably still going to be debating this 10 years from now. I don't think Nintendo's going to make him talk anytime soon. I would be shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, like, absolutely shook if we ever got a trailer for a Zelda game and Link just talked. That would be like a mind blown, like crazy pop off moment. I guarantee you it would be a separate clip on the channel, because I would lose my mind if I heard him actually speak. I'm honestly, we're talking about silent protagonists, and one thing I haven't brought up yet, I'm surprised none of us have brought up yet, is we're about to get a Mario movie where he talks. Right. And that to me is wild in and of itself. Yeah, I know. I'm not sure how I feel about it being Chris Pratt, but we are about to have like at least 90 minutes of Mario just talking like a fully fleshed out normal ass character, and I don't know what to do with that. And I wonder how it will influence the future of the Mario games. Like, are we going to have Mario talking in games?
I don't think it actually will, because I think it might influence the games if it was still Martinet. The fact that it's not Martinet, it doesn't matter. That is not a big thing. He's just another character now.
I hate to say it. I hate to even put this out in the universe, but I have to now, because we've explored the possibility somewhat. So the foot is in the door. What if this is like the thing that makes Nintendo say like, hey, Charles, like, you're really good for but we need somebody who can deliver monologues, and now we're going to get we're gonna get
no. Nintendo is too traditional. You're asking Nintendo to do dialogues when Miyamoto has famously tanked Mario stories because he wants it to keep it as simple as possible.
Oh, I 100% agree, but I also think that if this movie makes like $300 million, Nintendo's going to be like, you know what? People like it when Mario talks, and we love money. I don't know, and I would never bank on it. Like, I certainly am not putting down like an official bet that Mario is going to speak after this movie comes out if it does well, but I do wonder, if we're kind of slowly inching our way into a new era where Nintendo realizes, or where Nintendo focuses on kind of fleshing out these characters a bit more. Like, you can see the beginnings of it with Luigi's Mansion 3. Like, the cutscenes from Luigi's Mansion 3 feel like, if you drop those into a Saturday morning show, I would watch the hell out of that. Like, I think that they are, on the animation front, giving these characters more and more life with each generation. Where you think about the dramatic difference in Link's expressiveness from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask to Wind Waker, right? Where he's ever so close to just being this complete character. And then they kind of like turn him into, the edgelord Twilight Princess Link.
So they kind of step back from that with Twilight Princess, and
but they move a bit closer to it with Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword. Like, Skyward Sword Link, off-putting though his face may be, is a lot more expressive than Twilight Princess Link. And then I would argue that Breath of the Wild Link is kind of like that perfect combination between being like the cool badass Link that they kind of try to represent adult Link as, and the kind of funnier, cartoonier, Hero of Winds Link. But it's interesting to me because in general I don't like silent protagonists, but when I think about Mario changing and becoming like more Mickey Mouse-ish, I guess, right? Like, Mickey Mouse talks. I don't know that I like that future for him. Like, I think that Mario might be totally okay if he's just always, Mamma Mia, and that's it. Like, that's all we get.
I mean, we've seen something of a blueprint for what a more vocal Mario could look and sound like, and of course, old school interpretations like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, the Super Mario World cartoon.
Oh no!
So it's going to be weird because I agree with you, Steve, it feels as though we have no point of reference for what the hell this Illumination movie is going to be like, with Mario actually having a vocal role, and At the same time, we have seen a little bit of what that could look like, even though it doesn't feel like it could be in any way similar. So it's weird that we both kind of have a touchstone for what a bespoke vocal Mario looks like, but also don't really with this new version, because again, it's not we're having a voice come out of the current 3D rendered Mario, as opposed to animated Mario from the cartoon show or the movie, the live action movie. So it's weird. We both do and don't have a touchstone.
There is an example of Mario speaking full sentences, and that's the old PC game.
That's true.
Mario talks to you.
I forgot about that.
And you get him in full sentences, so it's not impossible. And he started to speak in more longer sentences as both Luigi and Wario. It is becoming longer and longer as time goes on, and I think it's just sort of getting people ready.
Yeah,
right.
It is interesting to think about this. Ash, when you brought up the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, right? That casted my mind back, and it's interesting to think about how, in a weird way, Nintendo has trained us to have certain feelings about their characters. Because obviously, when the Super Show was on, that was our first time hearing Mario speak for most of us, right? Like we never heard him. He wasn't talking in the games at that point.
Right.
He didn't have, like, Mario made no sounds, and hearing him talk, I was never like off put by it. I was never like, oh, that's not what Mario sounds like. That's not the Mario that exists in my head canon. But now when I think about it, and it's still, I've gone back and watched episodes of the Super Show with my kids, and I still don't find that like weird or off-putting. But when I think about 3D Mario, like you mentioned, like 3D Mario that I've been seeing on screen, who is in my mind inextricably linked to Charles Martinet's voice.
Yeah.
And I think about Chris Pratt doing it. I'm like, that's weird. Like, I don't want Star-Lord doing that.
Mamma Mia.
Yeah.
Let's
Mamma
go.
Mia.
Yeah. God.
Oh man, God. I can't. But it'll be
so
interesting
long,
for me
King
to
Bowser.
see. I also can't. We don't talk about this enough. I can't imagine Charlie Day doing Luigi. Like, I have almost as hard a time with that.
Weird.
Like, I think about Charlie from Always Sunny doing Luigi, which makes me think awful things about Luigi.
It helps his panicky personality.
It does. I agree with that. Like, Charlie Day does a really good job of bringing like a frenetic, panicked energy to roles that he's part of. But it's at the same time, it's like I can't separate it from like the skeezy characters that he plays pretty often and the things that those characters get up to. But I agree. It'll be interesting to see. And I think that I think Mario, the reason that Mario works really well, to kind of bring it all the way back to a silent protagonist thing, I think the reason Mario works really well as a silent protagonist is because his games are never really about him. Like, they're about just gameplay first and exploring worlds and finding things and doing stuff. You're always thinking about just like, where's the next star, where's the next moon, or but I'm never thinking like, oh my god, Bowser's gonna marry Peach, I gotta stop that. Like, I don't care about that. I don't care about the stakes in the Mario universe at all. I care about just having a really good time exploring these cool worlds that they've created for us. And I think that that's probably the difference between like Mario and Zelda for me. Like, I care about the world and the lore in Zelda, whereas with Mario, I'm just like, I want to pull off some cool jumps and I want to fight some fun bosses and have a good time with it.
What's funny is that I agree, but I would say there was one instance in which, and this is a slight tangent, but I was actually surprised, and I'm still surprised to this day, by just how much Nintendo made me care about the stakes in Super Mario Galaxy 1. That was the one time in a Mario game where I actually felt this is epic. And a lot of that had to do with the wording of the way certain things were phrased. So, like, you need to go save I think she said, Rosalina calls Peach Mario's loved one or dear one or something, at the center of the universe. You have to travel to the center of the universe to save the one you love. And there's something about the epic scale of everything that happens in Super Mario Galaxy that actually, for the first time, made me care about Mario actually going to save Peach. I was like, oh, there's something about this that feels really epic, and I'm rooting for Mario. At the same time, though, it's not something that would have been made even better by Mario being more emotive or anything. He was perfectly fine the way he was. He didn't need to be anything other than the Charles Martinet Mario he already is. for that fantasy to be sold to me, for that epicness to be sold. So there are interesting instances in which, you know, you can have that emotional connection despite the character you're playing as not being particularly emotive themselves. And I don't know why it works in Mario Galaxy 1, and Miyamoto sure as hell did everything he could to stamp out any and all traces of that emotional connection in Galaxy 2, and he succeeded in my opinion. But Galaxy 1 is a weird example of a story that works, and you can feel the epic quality and the emotional quality of the quest Mario's on this time without him being particularly emotive, and I always found that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but I think we've pretty well
yeah,
plumbed the depths.
yeah,
like we've kind of gone off topic a bit.
Oh, for sure, but that's, you know, it's always fun to kind of see where these avenues of conversation will lead us, and you know, you never know what can spark some cool new point. But I would agree. The only other thing I would say is there is a bit of a monkey's paw situation here where you might think you want to get more into the heads of certain characters and hear their thoughts more, and that can work really well in instances that we've laid out in this discussion. But also, you can also, you know, sometimes get Metroid Other M, where you're hearing way too much of what the character's thinking, and it's like, okay, maybe let's scale it back a little bit, and that's for the record. I think that's something Metroid Dread and Fusion do very well. They give you the right amount of insight into Samus's character and her thoughts and her emotions.
I mean, it's also
going way
not
too
getting
much
completely
into it.
flat voice direction. So
yeah,
that too.
Exactly. I think that's the more of a death knell there.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I do agree with you, though, Derek. I think we've pretty much covered it here. Do either of you have anything else you want to mention before we head out here?
I have to mention this for our conspiracy theorists in the audience. You mentioned Super Mario Galaxy. I love the implication that Rosalina might somehow be the daughter of Luigi and Peach.
Me too. I don't know how, but I love
God.
some timey-wimey bullshit. I love the idea of that being even somehow possible, even remotely. I agree.
Mario travels to the center of the universe to save her, and then she hooks up with Luigi. I'm just saying that. That's a little messed up. But either way, man. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I you know what? The one thing I do want to do, I seldom do this in videos, and I always mean to, but if you've listened to the end, let us know your favorite silent protagonist down in the comments, because I'm curious to hear what you guys think about who this mechanic works well for.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm sure there are so many instances of characters on both sides of the spectrum where it works and where it really doesn't work that we haven't even thought of in this discussion. So please do let us know your favorites and least favorites in the comments below. But with that said, I do think that brings us to the end of this discussion. And as a reminder, you can vote on the topics we discuss for discussions just like this one by becoming a patron over at our Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming. This is a perk reserved for our patrons at the producer tier and above, which is just $10 a month. But regardless of that, we do offer various tiers below and above that amount that you can support us at. We'd really appreciate it. But even if you can't do that and you just support us here on YouTube, we really appreciate it. Just drop a like, a subscribe, ring that notification bell. Every little bit does help as we keep on growing. And remember, when we hit 75,000 subs right here on YouTube, we are giving away a free Switch OLED model to a lucky subscriber. Literally, all you have to do is be subscribed when we hit 75K, and you could win a Switch OLED. Pretty sweet deal, I think. But that's all from us today. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.